Hello everyone, and you're all very warm welcome aboard to this PMDG Boeing 737 for Microsoft Flight Simulator tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to do the final CDU Preflight procedure as well as the takeoff performance calculation. My name is Emmanuel, I am a real-life Boeing 737 pilot and member of the PMDG tech team, and I am going to show you this all on the pre-release version of the 737. This is a beta, so you can expect a couple of issues, but all of those are probably known by PMDG at this point in time. This being said, I have selected the default scattered cloud weather scenario for this flight, just to make it a little bit easier to record all these videos over a different period of time. Now with this said, let's get into our video. Now I have to say that the procedures in this video are going to deviate a little bit from the procedures we're using in my real airline. The reason for that is that since we don't have a proper load information document available, and since we do not have the Boeing onboard performance tool available here, it's just not possible to use the exact standard operating procedures in the simulator. However, I'm going to adapt them as good as possible to give you good guidance of how to proceed. So basically, first of all, we're checking that we actually have the fuel load and that we actually have the payload on board that we plan to take here. 51.5 tons of zero fuel weight. Now on the init reference page, verify, you can just click on the LSK3 left to make sure that it's automatically populating the scratch pads with the zero fuel weight that you currently have in your aircraft. Just click on it again to insert it. If it was any different than what we've pre-selected, you would see it here now. Also review the gross weight, make sure it's within limits, and if you have any performance software for the 737, compare it with the gross weight of the performance software as a gross error check to make sure that you don't mistype anything. Alright, now we're going to execute this, and now we'll have a look into TopCat. Now TopCat is takeoff and landing performance calculation tool. It's a fairly old tool by now, however it's still doing the job, and until there's something better available, this is probably the best we have. So we're standing in London Stansted, Echo Golf Sierra Sierra. We'll have a quick look at the weather over here. Click on the weather tab. This is telling me the wind is variable at 2 knots, gusting 2 knots. So what we're going to do, we've got runway 22, and we'll just select the tailwind of 2 knots. So I'll make it 040 at 2. The temperature in this weather scenario you can grab from your engine display, 15 degrees centigrade, and the altimeter is standard 1013. It's dry. As for the takeoff weight, 56.1. Flaps configuration, you can choose between an optimum setting or between a fixed setting. In my airline we're always using flaps 5 for the takeoff, since we're mainly operating 800 and 8200 series aircraft, both of which only have marginal tail clearance. So for the 800, if you're taking off with flap 1, you only have about 30 centimeters of tail clearance, provided you are using a correct piloting technique, and about 50 centimeters using flaps 5. For the 700, it's not that much of a concern. You can leave it at optimum and see what it gives you. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to use flaps 5. Thrust config, you can choose between the different D-rate levels. We're going to leave it at optimum. The air conditioning system will be on and the anti-ice system is going to be off. For the anti-ice over here, do note that if you take off and you do not expect to use the wing anti-ice after takeoff, you simply use the engine setting. And if you do expect to use the wing anti-ice after takeoff, only then you'd select engine and wing. Now, why am I explaining this? That's simply because unless the aircraft has been de-iced on the ground in the 737, you would turn both engine and wing anti-ice on. However, the wing anti-ice is switching off automatically once you are setting your takeoff thrust. Alright, so standard runway 22. We do not have any engine out procedure available here, but we've taken it previously from Blackbox 711's website, which I'm once again really thankful he has. Is there a temporary runway shortening? No, there isn't, and we do not have any inoperative items. And actually we don't have any takeoff malfunctions available for this airplane in TopCat. Now, there are some available in the PMDG, but not in here. Okay, we click on compute, so it's giving us a flaps 5 takeoff with a second D-rate at 31 degrees assumed temperature. Now, a small word on the assumed temperature method we're seeing over here. There are multiple conditions which would prohibit the use of assumed temperature. However, you could still use the fixed D-rate method. So, for example, with the anti-skid or thrust reverses inoperative, or with the electronic engine control in alternate mode, with any kind of a contaminated runway, or if the aircraft has been de-iced, or when performing an engine bleeds off takeoff, and most importantly, when the crosswind is greater than 10 knots, then we are prohibited from using the assumed temperature thrust reduction method. In that case, you can only select the full thrust rating. And note that if the airplane has been de-iced, a minimum of a 24K is required. So in this one, we're getting a takeoff 2 at 31 degrees. Now we go to the N1 limit page. We've got 24K, 22K, 20K, and a 26K bump. Now, TopCat unfortunately uses slightly different terminology, but takeoff 2 equals the 20K D-rate, and then we have 31 degrees of flax temperature in here, giving us 88.7% N1, compared to TopCat giving us 84.3. Now, I'm afraid that TopCat is not exactly accurate to the PMDG 737 for a Microsoft Flight Simulator here. I have checked the PMDG values using my real Boeing performance tool, and they are spot on. It's TopCat that's a little bit off here. If you do happen to have some better software, then you have to compare the predicted N1 with the actual N1 up here. And do note that if you do not have the bleed air system operating at the moment, because you're on ground power without an external air conditioning or air starter unit, then do note that your N1 is going to be slightly lower, in the region of 0.6 to 0.8, depending on the settings you've done here, than it would be when you turn the bleeds on. So a small difference in the region of 0.6 to 0.8% N1 is totally normal. We're heading off for the takeoff page. Said it's going to be a flap 1 takeoff. For the center of gravity, you can simply click on it, and then it's going to import whatever the airplane currently has. And that's giving us a trim of 6.7 units, so we'll start trimming over here. Now, some of you will say, why do I not hear any trim sounds? Well, that's because this is still a pre-release beta and the trim sounds are currently not implemented. They will be added by the time this airplane is going to be released. Right, 6.6 units, as good as it gets over here. And for the takeoff speeds, we have 124, 125, 130. Again, we're cross-checking those over here. 125, 126, 130. If they are within 1 knot, or rather if the FMC speeds are within 1 knot of the performance software, you can simply use the FMC speeds. If they are not, then you'll have to use the speeds from the takeoff calculator and establish why there is such a big difference. Now again, with flight simulation software, there can be more of a difference than there usually is with real-life software. The PMDG here is doing is usually doing the correct job. When I've done several calculations using the Boeing OPT, and the PMDG usually ended up where the real airplane ended up as well, while some of the takeoff performance calculators available for flight simulation use do tend to, you know, not be as accurate, unfortunately. Alright, this is the final CDU Preflight procedure done. And now we're ready to go into the next step and slowly start preparing our aircraft for the pushback. That, however, is for another video, so I'm looking forward to see you next time. And I'm especially looking forward to finally get flying with you.